Hey, listeners. Today we are here with Adam Baker. Adam is a strategic partner with Schooley Mitchell. For anyone that doesn't know, Schooley Mitchell is the largest independent cost reduction consulting firm in North America, with offices from coast to coast in the United States and Canada. They truly are masters at working behind the scenes to help you reduce expenses, allowing you and your team to focus on what matters most, which is your patients. I hear from dentists every day that are feeling the effects that inflation has had on their practices, which is exactly why I invited Adam to join us on today's episode. You see, Adam has managed to reduce costs for his clients by average on 28%. And I am positive that some of our listeners could really benefit from a 28% reduction in costs. And I can't wait to introduce him to you guys. So, Adam, thank you so much for joining us today.
Denae, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on the show.
Awesome. So, Adam, crazy story. You and I have kind of a random mutual connection. So, Adam, our mutual connection is my husband, Brandon, who has never been in the dental industry and has nothing to do with reducing costs for business. Can you share with our listeners a little bit about how you know Brandon? Because you've actually known him longer than I have.
Yeah. So Brandon and I went to college together. He and we both received scholarships to ROTC at the University of Pittsburgh. And in 2001, he and I met there. And we were both non-traditional students, meaning that most of the freshmen there had just graduated high school and they went to ROTC. Brandon and I had both enlisted in the Air Force and received these scholarships. So when he and I showed up there, immediately he and I were linked because we had these shared experiences. And Denae, we laugh. Brandon and I did not like one another. We were so similar. We're so competitive. We were so similar that we were just kind of like, water and vinegar or water and oil. We just didn't get along. And then about 2 years into knowing each other, we went on a field training exercise and he and I kind of rose to the top of the pack there. And there were things we had to rely on each other for. And we really gained valuable insights into what the other brings to the table. And after that, it was like a match made in heaven. We love spending time with each other. We bounce ideas off each other just because we recognized there was more value in collaboration than there was in competing.
Yeah, I love that. I love that story so much because I feel like it's human nature. When you first meet somebody, it's like when you have a pack of lions, right? The male lion never wants another male lion in his territory because they're almost threatened. And it sounds to me like you and Brandon were like the two male lions that were like threatened by each other. But then once your head actually could grasp the situation and say, you know what, they actually can help get us what we need to get, all of a sudden it clicked and you guys were really good friends. I love that story so much.
Absolutely.
Amazing. And what a small world, right? Like I having things in common because we both work with dental practices. And here we are years later. You and I are now recording something that doesn't even have anything to do with the service or the Air Force. So just a wild world, crazy story.
And it's the beauty of where we're at in society, that the ability to connect with folks so quickly and so conveniently. It's and I think maybe this is a post-COVID effect. I don't want to say COVID was good for anybody, but if nothing else, people are a lot more comfortable with connecting with folks throughout the world that maybe they wouldn't have connected with before. There's really this value in knowing people outside of your small sphere.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Adam, from the service to expense reduction, how did you make that transition? Like, what brought you from ROTC, the service, and then transitioning into cost reduction? How did you get here?
So this is the traditional story of the criminal who goes to work with the FBI. And before you get too concerned, let me explain. So in between then, I went and worked for utilities. And I was given really two jobs. One was to reduce the costs for the utility, their own costs. But I was also given a project. It was they gave me $250 million to spend over 5 years, and I had VPs and general managers and engineering managers that worked with me. And our job was to get a fee on every invoice that went out. and to have that happen in perpetuity. And I say that not because I'm looking to not make very many friends, but I say that because I understood the lengths to which vendors will go to take your money. And as I worked more and more for the utilities, I realized our values were kind of getting further and further apart. And so when I was looking for opportunities, I came across Schooley Mitchell. Schooley Mitchell's a franchise. We have, as you said, locations all across the United States. But their goal is really to help those organizations fight off those vendors. This utility I worked with, they were a multi-billion-dollar organization, and it's hard for even a $10 million dental practice to try to fight back against those fees. Schooley Mitchell, what they did really spoke to my values. I understood the value. It aligned with my skill set already. So I said, this is a great opportunity for me to go out and do something that I'm passionate about.
That's very cool. So you get into the nitty gritty, into the little details to help ultimately get the results that you get. Walk us through what your typical journey looks like when you first partner with somebody, right? Like with a business. What does that journey usually look like, and how do you ultimately get the results that you get? Because the results that you're getting are amazing. I mean, on average, 28% cost reduction is huge. Help us understand a little bit about what that journey looks like and how you partner with practices to get those results.
Right. So, and I'm glad you used the word partner because it truly is a partnership in that we are collaborating with the organization. So, our goal, we aren't vendors. We're not looking to sell them something. If someone likes, I'll give you an example. So, if the dentist likes a specific, we'll use an easy one because everyone can relate. If someone likes Coca-Cola, our job is not to go convince them that Pepsi is better than Coca-Cola. Our job is to say, how do we get that Coke for you cheaper than what you're currently getting it? And we don't want to go to some off brand and be like, well, this tastes like Coke, but it's not Coke. It's like we want to get you that exact same can. We just want to get it cheaper for you. And so the first part is just getting to recognize that there's opportunity there. Once we get them to understand that there may be an opportunity to find some savings there, it's really just as simple as us having a conversation to understand what it is that they use, how they use it, and what they're paying for it. And then our job, we've got about 150 analysts that all they do is cost reduction. They don't have some bigger mission that they're working on. All they do is that. And so when we bring them an opportunity, they'll say, okay, well, we worked with all these other dental organizations in the past. We know what they're paying compared to this. They're off balance here. There's an opportunity here. So we will do an analysis. Our goal is not to find the most savings. Our goal is to find them the right service for the right price. And so that's where we do that partner. And then, so we'll do our analysis, and the nitty gritty is probably boring. We can get into that later, but we'll do the analysis and we come back and we just make our recommendations. And then really it's up to the dental practice to determine what they want to do. On the back side of it, and this is really where the partnership comes in, on the back side of it, we don't just make a recommendation and then leave it to them. If they want that implemented, we implement it for them, and then we watch their vendor to make sure that there's no rate creep, or we call it discount remorse. We really make sure that those rates that get put in there actually stay in it.
Wow. So I know a lot of like working with practices, a lot of times the office managers or owner, depending on who's working through expenses and the budgets and paying, all the bills, a lot of times they feel like we've done everything we can, right? Like I'm cutting all the corners I can. There's nothing more I can do. What areas do you typically see as maybe a bigger opportunity than others, kind of across the board whenever you're working with dental offices?
Yeah, and that's common for everyone, right? They want, no one wants to think they're leaving money on the table. And so some of the expense categories that we look at, their telecommunications. So that's their phones, their internets, their fax lines, their waste. And that's not just their normal waste, but the medical waste. Uniforms, if they have uniforms for their employees, we do those. Mats and cleaning supplies and office supplies. For dental practices, though, the biggest one that we find the most savings for is typically their credit card processing. And that's because credit card processing in the dental world is almost like a sacred cow. That there's a lot of misconceptions about it, and so there's some concerns about ever looking at it. So they feel like we've got the best rates we can. There's nothing more that we can do here.
Yeah. Now, something that's starting to come up often, it's kind of just bubbling up in the dental world, is transferring your merchant fee to the patient. And we see it at restaurants, right? And it might be an after effect of inflation or COVID and all sorts of reasons. But we're seeing a lot more in dental practices where there are businesses that are coming in and they're saying, hey, if you work with us, you don't have a merchant fee. You can actually pass that off to the patient. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so can I say it depends? There's a few things about that because you're right. It's happening and it's growing. So there's a couple things to think about. If you get your merchant rates as low as they should be, then that's not as enticing as an offer. Because what's going to happen is they're going to charge 3.5%, no matter what the cost is, they're going to charge 3.5% to your patient, right? And that's an add-on. So if you can get yours down to maybe 1.5%, you're really going to scratch your head and say, well, why would I add another 2% onto my patient's fees? Why do I want to have that discussion? The other thing that's happening is you have to be very, very intentional about how you charge that money. Visa, earlier this year, Visa came out, they sent a notice out to everyone who accepts visas. And what they said is, if you want to do this, that's okay, but we're going to give you some rules. And, it went down to you have to use this size font to make the notifications. As soon as they come in the door, they have to know that. On their bill, it has to say something very specific. And so what Visa's doing is they're sending out secret shoppers. And if you do that and you're not in compliance, they're going to do one of two things. They'll fine you either up to $25,000 or they'll revoke your Visa acceptance privileges.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, and there's a lot of, each state has their own limits on how much you can charge. Some of them will only let you pass on so much. So it's an option. I'd probably say it's in the dental world because the prices could get higher. It's probably not the most enticing option. I would say you might be better off just trying to lower your fees as much as you can and just accepting that as a cost of doing business.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I've seen it work, with some of my other offices. I've seen it work to where they tell patients, hey, this is going to be, we're passing this fee off to you. You almost present it as confidently as possible so the patients don't question it. So I have seen it work, but I think that what you're hitting right on is, are you doing the best thing for the patient? Where if you can get into the nitty gritty and you can reduce those fees by 1 or 2%, and then ultimately cost the patient less to get the work done. I think the question is, does that align with your philosophy or not as a practice, right?
It,
Like if you're in this so that you can truly provide dentistry for your community, it might be a safer route to just work on reducing the expenses rather than passing that expense off to the patient.
Yeah. And Denae, here's something for your listeners to think about. If they're considering that and they're willing to have that conversation, maybe before you do, give yourself 4 months. And instead of having the conversation of we're going to charge this rate, say, explain to your patients if you add a PIN number to this, if you run your card as a debit card versus a credit card, then the fee isn't as high right? It's coming from the same bank account, but the fee's not as high. And so we all kind of win in that instance. So because there's congressional limitations to how much a debit card transaction can be charged to the dental practice versus credit cards. So if they're willing to have that education moment of, hey, we're going to charge you XYZ, maybe try saying, would you mind if we run this as a debit card, put your PIN in, and that'll save us money.
Yeah, a lot of times I think, Adam, you're hitting it right on too. It's just a simple conversation. The patients want to see you win, right? They're coming to you as a practice because they like you guys. They like doing business with you. They feel valued with you. And so if you ask them, hey, can you do us a favor because it costs us less money? It's just like asking for a patient for a review or for a referral. If you just ask them and tell them, hey, we're trying to grow our business and we would love patients just like you, they want to see you succeed. And so they're going to be a little bit more apt to leave that review or to send a referral. So it's the same mindset of, if you just ask them, hey, can you write us a check? Or instead of running it as credit, can you run it as debit? That simple question can ultimately help reduce your expenses. That's amazing.
The other thing is, there's this big philosophy of nudges, right? Like to get someone to do something, you give them a nudge, kind of set it up and make it easy for them. So when you set up your credit card processing, have that, and Walmart does this all the time, where it automatically defaults to entering your PIN, and then you have to choose credit card. That's a very simple way. You don't even have to have the conversation. And then when they see it, they make that decision to either run it as a debit or as a credit card.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Awesome. Little gold nuggets here. Nice, nice, nice. All right, Adam. So you partner with them. How does your analytic team? How do they get into the nitty gritty to figure out? Are you giving them invoices, or how are they getting the data that you guys are using to analyze their practice?
Yeah. So what we do is we'll sit down and we'll do a bit of a fact finding to understand what they need, but we do need to see those invoices, right? And I just want to let's stay on merchant processing just because it's the easiest one to talk about. It's probably the biggest headache they have. What we do is we ask for those invoices, and we've developed some specialized software that allows us to break out all the fees that they're being charged. That way we can see what exactly is it that they're paying for. Once we understand that, then our team can go back to their vendor and they can begin the negotiation process. Or for credit card processing, there's only certain things you can negotiate on. Interchange rates are, though, in your fee, if you pay 2.5% or 3% to the credit card companies or your processing, a bulk of that is going to the banks in the form of what's called an interchange fee. And that's non negotiable. Those change twice a year. There's about 700 different rates that apply, and those are non negotiables. And then there's card service fees, which are your Visa, MasterCard. They get a piece of it. But inside of there are processing fees. That's the part that's negotiable. That's what the processor takes. When we're able to break that all apart and we're able to see exactly how much the processor's taking, now we can have the discussion about, okay, based on what we've done with other organizations, this seems to be quite high. What can we do to reduce these rates? So we'll do that with their vendor, but then we'll also do it with some other vendors that if they're using a certain type of system, like if they're using Dentamax or Practice Web, what are some other processors that might integrate there? We'll talk to them and see, well, what rates can we get you on this? And then we'll go back and we'll say, hey, here's the options for you, dental practice. What do you want to do? That's part of the work. Once we implement it, the back side of it is every month we do that same analysis. We break it out because what we want to make sure is there's not any billing errors or discrepancies. And this is something else for your listeners. If their software that they're using is EagleSoft, Practice Web, Excel Dent, or Dentamax, they aren't the ones that are processing the payments. They're just the software. There's a processor embedded inside there. I'm not going to say the processor because I don't want to make anyone sound bad. But if your clients are using that, the processor inside of there had an issue in June where they issued a ton of billing errors. They're not going back to those customers to find that billing error and say, here, fix it. It's up to the customer to see it and go back. So what I would recommend is if they're using that to go back to their processor and say, hey, we think there's a billing error here, they're immediately going to know what you're talking about and they'll refund you the money. That's what we do after we implement it. We review that to make sure that if there's that billing error, we're going back to get that money back for our client.
Wow. Wow. So it sounds like you guys are doing a lot of the legwork yourselves. You're not putting a lot of it on the practice. How much, if anything, would the practice be doing to help you guys, help them?
Yeah. So our goal is to burden the practice as least as we can. We really view the practice as their job is to build those relationships with the patient and take care of the patient. Right. And to get into the weeds of all this is not going to bring as much value as building those relationships. So we would take about 2 hours up front, and usually it's broken over an hour 1 week, and about 2 weeks later we'll have another hour. That's what we're going to need from them. After that, we're pretty much out of their hair. And then we'll do our analysis, we'll come back, and then we'll do the implementation piece. And there's really not a whole lot that they need to do there. We're just going to circle back and say, hey, is everything working the way it should? And with the practice manager or the dentist, I meet with them quarterly to review the results, just to say, okay, here's the results that we've achieved. Is everything working good? Has anything changed? Because we want to continually find ways to optimize their practice. And the only way we know that is by having those touch points.
Wow. Wow. So it's a few hours of investment on the practices side, right? Let's talk through everything. And then you guys are going to do a lot of the legwork. And then every few months you're sitting down and you're showing the results and you're saying, hey, here's what we're seeing. Are there any other areas maybe that we can work through?
Absolutely.
So it's very little interruption on the practices side for potentially such a big return.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the goal. We want to make this as easy for them as possible. That way, again, we share in the savings. So if this is very disruptive, nobody's going to want to work with us. If I'm running my business, I don't have the time to break away. I'm focused on my business. And so because we don't have an upfront fee, our success is dependent on not only them working with us upfront, but then developing solutions they do want to implement. Because, and I said this before, it's not just about finding the savings. Because if you find a lot of savings, if we say, hey, we can make a lot of money by finding a lot of savings, but if it doesn't align with the dentist practice and what they're trying to do, they're going to say no, and all of it was for naught. So
Yeah.
it's really finding the solutions that they will accept, that will bring them value to their practice and to their bottom line.
Yeah. Adam, that speaks to my soul, because I personally, I mean, I've worked for a DSO that I did not align, like my core values did not align with their core values. And so I did decide to make the transition from there. And one of the aha moments for me was when I had to get on the phone with a local lab. See, we had just bought out private practice, and we were looking at their expenses. We were looking at what we could do to make it so that our budget made sense, right? So that our numbers could be reported back to our private equity team and they would be happy. That's what we were looking for. We weren't necessarily focused on the nitty gritty of the patients or the relationships. And my aha moment was when I had to get on the phone with a local lab and let them know that if they don't reduce their costs, that we're going to have to move to a different lab that has lower fees. Now, keep in mind, Adam, this lab had worked with this particular practice for 20 plus years.
Yeah.
The owner doctor that sold the practice was adamantly against us, or he would not work with another lab. And when I had this conversation, the local lab owner, I mean, he's a small business. He owns it himself, and he was in tears. And he's like, "This is my biggest client, my biggest practice, and I just found out that I'm having a fourth baby, and I don't know how I'm going to afford this." So, like, I realized the impact that those kind of decisions were having, not only on the practice owner, right? Because he didn't want to switch labs, but the impact that it was having on the local lab guy. And it was also that we could make private equity happy. And so for me, I'm like, knowing that there are companies out there like you, that it's not about ruining relationships. It's not about getting the lowest cost out there. It's about figuring out, hey, can we keep you having what you have, but reduce the cost so that it's a win-win for everybody?
Absolutely. And what we found, because a lot of folks are like, well, how do you negotiate with them? And it's like, are you going to the table and pounding your fist? I said, no, because nobody wants to work with you that way, right? Like nobody wants to deal with someone. The way we work with the vendors is we go and we say, here's the opportunity, right? This is what we believe, that there's opportunity to lower these costs. What can you, right? And what we have found is vendors that provide a really good service at a really good rate, we bring them more opportunities they would have never gotten, because we say, well, you're a very good vendor, you do a good job. And so that's how we found ways to work with other vendors. It's like, well, you may lose a little bit of money here, but because you do such a good job and you're offering us such a good rate, we're going to come back and we're going to bring you opportunities maybe you've never seen. And what that does is it allows us, everyone's winning in that situation, right? It's not just the practice, not just the vendor, everyone can win. But we have to be very open and honest and transparent, right? We aren't going to go through, when we see a rate that we believe is a good rate, we're not going to go to the vendor and say, you need to lower it. What we're going to do is we're going to go back to the dental practice. We're going to say, listen, you're optimized for what you're paying for this. This is a good spot. Like, we wouldn't recommend leaving this vendor. And there's value to the dental practice for that too, because it's one less thing they need to be looking at. But it's about really all of us being very honest and, okay, how can we all win?
Absolutely. And what makes you guys the experts is what other practices have, right? Like, the fees that they have, what they're getting charged, the relationships with these other vendors. Whereas if you're a private practice, or maybe you've got 2 or 3 practices, you don't know all of the things, right? You don't know the different relationships. And so that's really the secret sauce for you guys, or kind of gives you guys that leg up, is you do know what other offices are doing, and you do know the relationships that they have. so you can have that conversation a lot more effectively.
Yeah, this goes back to the discussion or the point you had made before about maybe the office manager or the dentist saying, "Hey, we've cut everything that we possibly can here. There's no additional savings." So what we're bringing to the table is we've got a best in class database of all the market prices. And so here's what traditionally happens: someone in the office identifies an expense and thinks there's an opportunity to reduce the cost. That's whatever it might be, and their frame of reference is what they're paying right now. And so if they can reduce that even slightly, it's a win. They said, no, we worked with them. It's a win. But what we're saying is, yeah, but the market actually says you should be here. Our goal is to get you down here. Right. And so that's what we're trying to bring to them is we recognize the efforts that have been taken. But what we want to do is we want to bring up a tool that your team has never had before and see what we can do there.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's so cool. So what is that something that all of your clients will like you guys will use for all of your clients, or is that something that tell me a little bit more about how that will get implemented?
And how we'll
The like platform.
So what we're doing is with our databases. So our database is something internal. So what we'll do is we'll just look and trash is trash is trash, right? It doesn't matter if it's trash from a dental office or trash from from a vet practice. So what we'll do is we'll say, well, a similar sized organization with this much waste in this location paid this much for the dumpster. Let's compare it to this one. Where are we? And say, well, there's something off right there. The other way that it benefits is from when we negotiate that rate and we say, okay, well, we've negotiated it lower here. Let's go back to our current clients and let's see if we can negotiate lower for them now too. So that's kind of how it ends up. It's not a one and done recommendation. We'll continue trying to find ways to optimize their service to lower their costs. To the team at the office, the goal is they should not even really know we were there. The only people that should really know that we were there are the folks looking at the budget. If everyone in the office knows that we were there, we probably disrupted it, and that's not where we want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So Adam, speaking of how similar you and Brandon are, my husband, this might not surprise you, but he just joined the HOA, like our HOA this year. You said trash is trash is trash. Well, he immediately, like within 2 days of being on the HOA, had the like neighborhood's trash company switched over to another trash company for $10 cheaper a month per homeowner. So that's funny to me.
So we talk about altruism. Credit card processors and waste management companies, neither of them are very altruistic. They're out to make money, right? Their job, because they know you need them. So that's a great first spot, is to see, okay. And the other thing they say, is there's money in stink. Right, like if it doesn't smell good, if it's hard, there's money. So he hit the right spot.
It's so funny. So Adam, practices. How long do you typically work with them? Is it an ongoing system? Is it a few years? Tell us a little bit about what practices could expect on how long you would partner with them.
Yeah, so it depends. For some of our clients, typically it's about 36 months. 36 to 42 months is the initial agreement that we work with. After that, then what a lot of practices do is say, I don't ever want to look at my invoices again. Right. So there's not a whole lot of opportunity left for savings. Maybe we'll go and do another savings to see. But a lot of them will then just say, what would you charge us on an hourly rate that you're the guy that looks at these invoices? We just want to pay you. And then any savings you create, we get to keep all of it. And so it can be as short as 36 months, or there's some that they're on their 9th year and they're renewing again because they've gotten to the point where they say, we don't want to look at this. We want to focus on our patients. We want you guys to handle that part of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And with the little amount of time that you actually take from their day-to-day operations, why not? Right? Why not make sure that you're cutting the costs where it makes sense for your practice? Not necessarily the cheapest thing out there, but for what makes sense for your practice. It's a win-win for everybody.
Absolutely. The other thing that's funny, one of my dental clients say, you know what, Adam, I will keep employing you because when telemarketers call, we say send them to us. Because maybe they do have a good deal. We don't know, but send them to us. We can then validate what they have. And so he says, I won't let you go just because I'm tired of talking to telemarketers. When I say, here's Adam's number, call him. He said that to me is worth it because when I tell them I'm not interested, they just keep calling. So when they talk to you, I don't ever hear from them again.
Nice. So you will take those calls.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because again, our job is to validate vendors. And there may be a new vendor out there that they've got this really good product. We can test it in our systems. We can use our software to test it and to validate what they're saying is true. And it may be a good opportunity. And we want that because there's benefit to knowing that. But there's a lot of times where they're just, trying to sell something. And when we put it through our system, we'll say, well, this is what our client would have actually paid if they went with you. And then the conversation's done. They never call back.
Wow. Wow. This is so interesting. I feel like you, Schooley Mitchell, like what you guys are doing for businesses, for dental practices and businesses, it makes a huge difference. And I honestly feel like not enough people know. Not enough people know about what you guys do. The best way I can relate what you're explaining to practices, right, is a lot of offices know and understand the idea of insurance renegotiations. So they've got contracts, they're contracted into certain fee schedules, and every 5 years, they can go in and they can renegotiate their contracted rates. And there are specialists that go out and do that for them. So they don't have to do any of it. They give them a few reports, they analyze everything and tell them, hey, here are the new fees that we can get you. A lot of people know about them, right? They know about those particular companies. You guys are doing the same thing, but you're doing it on the back end, right? Insurance contracted rates are production beforehand. You guys are doing it on the back end. And I honestly think after me being in dental for 19 years, I haven't heard enough about what you guys do. And so I think that it's really important that our listeners and their friends and their families know that there are people like Adam out there, right? That you out there that truly can make such a big impact on their practices with them not really having to do a lot of work.
Yeah. And it's funny because there aren't a lot of people that hear of us. And, we've been around for almost 3 decades now. And we are members of the American Association of Dental Office Managers, but we typically don't do any solicitation or any marketing. Most of our business comes from our client referring us to another client because I understand, just as I mentioned, my client receiving those telemarketer calls, I understand how busy the office manager is and the dentist is. They don't have time to take those calls. So for me to call, I'm just one more person promising to save them money. The proof is really in the pudding when one of my clients says, Adam just saved me $25,000 on my credit card processing. You guys have to talk to this guy. That's really where, it all starts coming from. Opportunities like this, Denae, I'm grateful that you're willing to share this time with me for having an opportunity in front of your audience. But there's a great opportunity to help dental practices. And I shared this with you for your listeners. One of the reasons that I really enjoy working with dental practices is because as a young child, we had government assistance. That's where our medical and dental care came from. And in 9th grade, I broke a tooth and we went to go to our dentist and he had retired and he closed his business because there was nothing there for him to sell. He's a great man, but there was just, as he ran the business, it wasn't worth anyone buying. So he just closed it. My mom was, because she didn't have a lot of money, she was solely focused on working. Finding another dentist wasn't in the cards for us. So for 4 years, I went with a broken tooth in my mouth and it would cut my gums. It was discomforting. You don't really like to go out places because of that until I got into the military and they pulled that tooth for me. If I can help an organization, a dental practice, that way they have the choices. If they want to retire and not sell it, that's great. But if they want to retire and they do want to sell, I want to be able to help them to put them in a position where somebody wants to come and buy it, where they've freed up enough cash flow where it makes sense for someone to come in, or if they just want to live the life they want to do and not close that business. But dental practices are so important to our communities. They really are. You drive by them, unless you're in the dental world, you don't realize how important they are to not just the way you brush your teeth, your cavities, but your whole psyche, right? If having that broken tooth, having bad teeth, you don't want to go out in public. Like, it's embarrassing, and there's a level of confidence that dental practices give you that we want to make sure that they have the opportunity to make the decisions they want to make. And we don't want them to be forced into the decision because of some sort of cost that they're facing.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that speaks volumes to why you do what you do. It's not about coming in and just making a bunch of money, not for these practices, but for yourself. It's genuinely about caring about these practices and trying to figure out how can we reduce ultimately their expenses, increase their cash flow so that they have the freedom to make decisions for their community. If you have a practice that knows their numbers, if you have a practice that has solid cash flow, and you have a ninth grader come in with a broken tooth who has a single mom who can't afford to get that work done, that could be something that you give back to the community, right? That could be, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and take care of this tooth for you. But if you don't know your numbers, if you don't have that solid cash flow, it's really hard as a business owner to be able to take care of your community in that way, because you're struggling just to pay bills, right? Even though you want to give back and you want to take care of, that one-off case, if you don't know your numbers and you don't have a solid cash flow, it makes it so much harder.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Adam, is there anything else that you want to share with our listeners before we get off of the call?
Yeah, no, it's just, you don't have to be alone in this venture. There are so many opportunities for people that specialize in the things that you need. They do it every day. In the dental practice, it's really focused on that patient care. Let someone else look at the minutia, the details, but don't just hand it to them. You need to know it as well, but get someone that you trust to guide you through. This is not a sales pitch for Schooley Mitchell. This is anyone. There are people out there that can help you, but don't feel like you've got to do it alone. There's opportunities. Just reach out for them.
Absolutely. Love it. All right, guys. So you heard it here. You guys heard it today. You're not handcuffed to your current expenses. There could potentially be more opportunity to reduce your expenses, but still be able to do what you do, work with the people that you love to work with, without ultimately taking a lot of your time or investing a lot of time or energy to make it happen. There are ways to reduce your expenses, and there are experts out there like Adam and Schooley Mitchell that know exactly how to do it. So, Adam, thank you so much for jumping in and sharing with us all of the amazing impacts that you had and that you continue to have on businesses around our nation. For any of our listeners that want to connect with Adam or that want to continue picking Adam's brain, you can reach him directly at adam.baker@schooleymitchell.com. Until next time, this is Denae Black with Dental DNA Consulting, reminding you, dream big, plan smart, and then make it happen.